Reading Rainbow is made possible by funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by a grant from Kellogg's, who reminds you to take time each day for reading.
I've been focusing on older books with this channel so far, but I have read some newer books on the side, and I wanted to take a few minutes to highlight some of the better ones I've had a chance to read. One thing I've noticed about my writing is that I've maybe gotten too influenced by the older, pulpier stuff I've been reading, maybe at the expense of a more modern sensibility. So with that in mind, I think next season we'll have a greater mix of vintage and more modern-ish sci-fi books. So without further ado, here's a few newer books that caught my eye recently. But you don't have to take my word for it. Of all the newer indie sci-fi books I've seen around over the last year or so, one that's always intrigued me was Eliane Boey's second book, Club Contango. So when I happened upon it at the Strand in New York, I took the opportunity to pick it up, and I'm very glad I did. As an aside, if you're into books and you're ever in New York City, the Strand is a great spot for both new and used books. Also, conveniently, Forbidden Planet is only steps away, so you can get a lot of your browsing done in one place. Anyway, enough unpaid plugs. Club Contango is the story of Connie Lamb, a single mom who runs a basement casino where people bet against their own futures. She's up to her ears in trouble, though, in constant need of coin to keep the casino going and herself solvent. Her former boss left her saddled with debt from a previous business arrangement. Another former business partner is using her likeness to generate street-level interactive holographic advertising without her permission, though he says she signed a contract. And her friend, the enigmatic Chance, is always up to something. So when Connie finds a dead body in the club, it's the last thing she needs. So we've seen plenty of futuristic cities in books, films, anime, etc. But somehow Club Contango has its own vibe. While the setting really is nothing new, Boey manages to evoke the familiar without things seeming derivative. One of the reasons I wanted to read this is because this was one of those books where if it didn't take place 100 years in the future in an asteroid base on the other side of a wormhole, it would barely be sci-fi. Which is great. Not all sci-fi ideas have to be constantly throwing the future in your face. People are people, no matter what time period, with the same problems and foibles one might expect from people in current year. I like the observations on labor and class issues explored here. Corporations have been antagonists in sci-fi stories since the genre was invented. And while they continue to create new torment nexuses and bankrupt toy stores for no real reason, realistic solutions to these problems are thin on the ground, and I think they'll continue to be so. So until things change on that front, I think corporations as antagonists are more than valid. It's sci-fi doing its thing. I'd like to talk more about the characters, but that might take us into spoiler territory. Like I said, the book is in first person. Connie's an engaging narrator, but somehow her being stressed out about all the things she had going on didn't actually make me stressed out, which can happen to me sometimes. Your mileage may vary, but I found this to be a net positive. Also, as an author, I'm influenced to some degree by what I read. One of the reasons I've been reading so much vintage sci-fi is that I want to put all those great old ideas through my brain filter and see what comes out the other end. One thing I noticed here and in some of the other newer books I recently read, like Binti, was that they were both very character-focused. I tend to be more plot-focused in my own work, so I like reading this kind of stuff to get a better handle on how to do it. Of course, both Binti and Club Contango are written in first person, which is out of step for the books I'm currently writing, but once I can get through the epically scoped books that establish the Pangolin Republic universe, I can't wait to write some more personal, smaller stories. Go deep with the characters. I realize I'm getting dangerously close to George Lucas' I just want to make art films territory here, but that's really where I'm at. I know I'm supposed to be talking about the book and not comparing and contrasting my own creative output, but Club Contango is a great example of the kind of personal, smaller story I hope to have the skill to write someday. If you're enjoying this video, why not buy my book? Flight of the Pangolin is the story of an intrepid group of heroes who decide to exit the solar system over the objections of an isolationist faction. There's actually a lot more going on than that. There's space pirates, a giant spider for no reason, all kinds of other things. Buy it now online wherever you buy books or at our website, www.thepangolinrepublic.com. You can also get fun t-shirts and random other stuff if you want. The reason I don't eat octopus is the same reason I don't eat dolphins, because I don't want to eat anything that might be smarter than me. I read this book just as I was starting the channel, and at the time I was reading a bunch of licensed books for season 1, but I really liked this one too, so I want to take a few minutes to talk about it. I think of all the possible covers, I got the best one, which is tough to do in this day and age. There's a lot of crappy covers out there, but I like this one a lot. So The Mountain in the Sea follows marine biologist Dr. Ha Nguyen, a cephalopod intelligence researcher, as she's invited by the Dianima tech conglomerate to the Kandao archipelago, where there are strange things afoot that might be relevant to her field of study. She's not quite alone. She is joined by Altansetseg, Dianima security officer, and the team lead on the investigation, Evrim, the first and only android in existence. All three of these are great characters, though I'm maybe a bit partial to the no-nonsense Altansetseg and her battered old translator module, which gives off the best dialogue. None of these characters are idiots, and I'm always glad when a writer fills a story with capable professionals at the top of their game and gives them challenges that test their abilities. You know, like a book. You'll notice I'm so far more or less avoiding the main plot, something about intelligent octopuses. Yes, it's pretty cool, it unfolds nicely, so I'm not going to spoil any of that. But a lot of that seems to take a backseat to the exploration of the themes of mankind's relationship with technology, artificial intelligence most specifically. Dr. Nguyen is stuck on a deserted island with the world's only android and a soldier who can only communicate through a half-buzzed translator unit, so you can see how these themes would stand out. Secondary to the main plot in the Kandao are a couple of other subplots that I found just as interesting, even if it was initially unclear how they might be connected to Dr. Nguyen's investigation. There's Rustem, who spends most of the book in cafes, who's offered the hacking job of a lifetime. He was a very cool character. And the harrowing story of Aiko, a slave laborer on an automated fishing trawler. The book starts out maybe a bit slow. There's a little bit of world building to get through to set up the setting. The book is not exactly action-packed, so this may not be one for the pew-pew fans, but I found it all really intriguing, and overall, I think it's worth a read if anything I've said sounds like something you might be into. This one is a little controversial for me because it's absolutely sci-fi and very well done too. But in my opinion, I've got some issues. This Is How You Lose the Time War is an alternating series of vignettes featuring red and blue, two agents on opposite sides of a time war. Over the course of their correspondence, which is hidden through increasingly crafty and clever means, they fall in love. But, of course, there are complications and difficult choices to be made. At a lean 197 pages, with large type, this one was a pretty quick read. Every once in a while, when a litfic author does something in the SF realm, they get lit up by the SF community for reinventing the wheel, and in some cases, they do such a bad job that the wheel has corners. Usually these stories are pretty good, just, not as original as these literary titans might have thought when they were writing it. And the whole time I'm reading this book, I'm constantly saying, this would have been so much better if it was a Faction Paradox book. An aside. Faction Paradox is an independent sci-fi setting created by the brilliant author Lawrence Miles. Began as a plotline about a time war from the range of the Doctor Who books in the 8th Doctor range. It grew like kudzu until that series' timeline had to be reset to get the range back to its original focus. Boo! At which point Miles took his IP and just ran with it. Books, audio dramas, a short-lived comic book. I lost track of the books after a couple of lackluster entries, by which time Miles had already left the project. But the first 4 books or so in that series were pretty tremendous. Warlords of Utopia was probably my favorite book for about 10 years. It's a tremendous book. I will talk about it eventually on the channel. And I recently picked up a hardcover of This Town Will Never Let Us Go, which is the first book in the series. This one is signed by the author. Fantastic. I will definitely do a video about Faction Paradox in general eventually, and those books in particular, I'm sure. Anyway, This book reads like it was originally a middling faction paradox fanfic story that got stripped of its setting and released as a standalone book, which might sound damning, but is actually pretty high praise in my book. And the thing is, it would have been better if it had been a faction paradox story, because it would have solved my biggest issue with the book. Because it's all character. Plot, setting, and world building all take a backseat. It's a style choice, and it's their book, and they've got every right to do it. And it's a beautiful read. But for me, it left me a little unmoored when it came to stakes. The reasons and goals for the eponymous Time War are never really spelled out in any detail. And for Red and Blue to risk their missions in the name of love is fine, but what happens when you lose the Time War? What happens when you win? Had this been a Faction Paradox book, just the fact that it's a book in that range would have done all the necessary heavy lifting with setting, plot, and world building. We know going in what the stakes are. As it stands, the characters aren't interested in any of that. They're too busy trading flirtatious letters. And the authors did a wonderful job putting together in beautiful and interesting ways, creating evocative word pictures, what their love is like. But Red and Blue felt almost, not completely, but almost, interchangeable as characters. I could be completely dense and maybe missed some deeper stuff, but yeah, that's always a possibility. Overall, I like this book. The author part of me thinks there's a lot of great prose work going on here, but I feel like the sci-fi fan in me needs a bit more detail to adequately feel the stakes involved. And if you're familiar with Doctor Who, or especially Faction Paradox, you may be looking for the area on the book where they filed off the serial numbers. So, what are some newer books that you've enjoyed recently? Let me know in the comments, but I'm sure I'll be back with my thoughts on an older book in a few weeks. But until then, I'll see you next time.